Hello, I'm Kirsty Young, and this is a podcast from the Desert Island Discs archive. For rights reasons, we've had to shorten the music. The programme was originally broadcast in 1980, and the presenter was Roy Plumley.
This week, our castaway is the soprano, Kiri Te Kanawa. Now, Kiri, did you find it difficult to narrow your choice down to 8?
Oh, terribly, yes.
Did you have any kind of plan to work on?
Yes, I have, my own small plan, which was I have a serious side to me and a very non-serious side. So I thought, if I'm going to be cast away on this island, I better get down to the nitty-gritty, because I can always be foolish, while I'm there, but I better take a little bit of the serious things with me.
Do you play records a lot at home?
Yes, a lot, as much as I can. We haven't been able to find the hi-fi system for about 18 months, actually.
Oh, you've been moving, haven't
yes.
you? Yes. Has it turned up now?
Oh, yes, it's come up very well, only I can't find the tapes now.
What's the first record you've chosen?
I've chosen Albinoni, the Adagio. When I first came to this country, it was almost the first music I heard, and we were doing it to the movement classes at the London Opera Centre. And I was convinced I was Isadora Duncan when I was doing it, and this music sort of makes you feel like that. But I was really brought up with a fright when I saw myself in the mirrors.
The Adagio in G minor for strings and organ by Albinoni, arranged by Giazzotto, and it was conducted by Carl Ristenpart. Now, you're from New Zealand, Kiri. What part of New Zealand?
I come from a little town called Gisborne. It's very, very tiny, and it is really a farmer's town, and there's no sort of great industry looming there or anything.
It's by the sea, isn't it?
Right on. Captain Cook called it Poverty Bay because the Maoris attacked him.
Now, your name is a Maori name. Mm-hmm. Your father, of course, he's the Maori side of the family.
Yes.
What does it mean?
Well, some people say Te Kanawa was a chief, and that he was very proud, very handsome. Of course, no one's ever ugly in these myths. And the tribesmen didn't like him very much, so he was ousted from the tribe and sort of started his own small tribe. Mm-hmm. And that's where I supposedly come from.
Yes. I believe your mother comes from a very distinguished musical family.
Yeah. She comes from the Sullivans, not the Sutherlands. Oh, gosh. That's the Australian lot, isn't it? Sullivan. Arthur Sullivan was her great-uncle on the feudal side of the family.
On the feudal side?
Yes, they were always fighting.
Oh, yes.
Dreadfully. Mm-hmm. And she came from that side. She said that they never got on or something.
Was the family musical?
Well, Mummy used to be very, very proud that she could read anything at the piano. And her sister and brothers would all play some sort of brass instrument. And it was a real mining town type environment where she lived. Mm-hmm. Quite poor, too, really.
Did you hear a lot of music as a child?
Yes, a normal entertainment was for everyone to sit around the piano, as in Victorian times. Mm. Now we do happen to have television out there and have for many, many years. But in my childhood, it was sitting around the piano or sitting on the beach with a bonfire, singing with guitar, piano, whatever. You could get some sort of instrument, just singing and making your own entertainment. So I was surrounded by music of all sorts.
And you began piping up quite early at those concerts.
Yes, I was always asked to sing, Her voice will travel.
Were you put to music lessons?
Yes, very quickly. At the age of 7, I was put to the piano and hated it right up to the last days that I pulled out from playing. But it was good for me.
What about school? A lot of music there?
No, mainly music at home. I would always have piano lessons at the schools because I was brought up a Catholic and went to Catholic schools, of course, and taught by the nuns. Then my mother decided that I was going to sing. I didn't decide because I really not very good at making decisions anyway. And so she scooted me up to Auckland, where I went to Dame Sister Mary Leo to start learning singing and piano and everything I could, and I just sort of took it up full time.
I believe you started working on radio very early.
Yes, I think I was maybe 5 or 6.
5 or 6?
Yes.
What, the child soprano?
Not quite. I was actually a child bass, I think, because I had a very low voice. I still have a very low voice. But it seemed to go up as I got older.
Well, there you are, a professional at that age. So let's pause here for your second record. What's that?
Well, Mozart has played a major part in my life, and I would love to hear the Flute Concerto No. 1.
Mozart First Flute Concerto, Richard Adeney, with the English Chamber Orchestra conducted by Raymond Leppard. So, you were in Auckland studying singing, doing bits and pieces on radio. What next?
Next came competitions. They're like Eisteddfods, but your Eisteddfods here in England are of a much grander scale.
Wales, really?
Yes. They called them Eisteddfods out in New Zealand and Australia. But it was sort of small competitions which you got around and you got a sort of a silver-plated cup for first prize, singing the aria from Oberon or something, Ocean Thou Mighty Monster, at the age of 19 or 20, which was ridiculous. You do some stupid things when you're young. I went in for all these competitions, and I gained first prize in nearly all of them, and I went in for a radio competition, which I suddenly discovered I wasn't terribly good with recording of my voice, and I thought, my goodness, I'm going to have to work on this. Then I went to Australia, and I went in for the Melbourne Sun Aria and the Sydney Sun Aria, which I became first in Melbourne, second equal in Sydney with a boy who was already over here, Tom McDonnell.
Oh, yes.
We became equal second. And then, of course, I came to England after that.
Still in your teens, I believe, with prize money and New Zealand Arts Council grant, with Mother.
Yes, with Mother. Always with Mother.
So what happened to you in London? You went to the Opera Centre,
yes,
which very sadly has disappeared.
Yes, very sadly. But it's sort of not really disappearing. Still.
Really?
No, there's a music college coming out of it, connected to Covent Garden, which is marvellous.
Now, you were a mezzo in those days. When and who discovered that you weren't really a mezzo?
Well, we had a masterclass with Richard Bonning, and he came with Joan Sutherland, and he said, my dear, you're not a mezzo, you're a soprano, which is a very simple way, I suppose, of getting me out of the fix that I was already in, where I didn't know where I was going. And I suddenly had a new sort of goal. I thought, well, if I'm going to be a soprano, I might as well work at it. And then it started off like that.
That meant rethinking things a bit.
A lot, because I was thinking all mezzo things and I wasn't liking it very much. My first pants role was not very successful, and I didn't like any of this sort of thing. I wasn't really built to be a mezzo.
How long were you at the centre?
4 years in all, I think.
Well, and then...
I was the oldest student.
Time to go out into the great big world. What was the first step, your first appearance?
The first appearance outside London Opera Centre were little things. There's always this gap. And then suddenly I'd done a lot of auditions at Covent Garden, and they said to me, would you like to sing Flower Maiden in Parsifal? I said, yeah, I'll sing anything, Yes. Covent Garden, I thought, this is it, the Mecca. And when I walked through the door the first day, I thought I was just the best.
Yes. Had they told you there's more than one Flower Maiden?
No, but it didn't seem to matter at that time. I was so enamoured. I was really starstruck and stage-struck. Everything. When I walked through that door, I thought I was just so wonderful. Of course, I've come down to earth since then.
It's a magic place, nevertheless.
Yes, it is. And that from there on, they had me doing this, and then Ksenia in Boris Godunov. And then, of course, my big sort of start was the Countess.
Right. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's have another record, your third.
I can't have Mozart without Strauss or Strauss without Mozart. It's my great love, and I've discovered Strauss for myself, and Mozart's helped me. So
This is
please
Richard Strauss, of course.
Yes, of course. Because please can I have the Tod und Verklärung by Richard Strauss.
Death and Transfiguration.
That's it.
Richard Strauss's Death and Transfiguration, Furtwängler conducting the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. Tell me some of these early little things you did while you were still playing very small parts at Covent Garden. You went up to Northern Opera, didn't you?
That's right, I did Carmen up there. This is before I really got to thinking that I was totally a soprano. See, by this time I hadn't discovered this wonderful singing teacher who I'm deeply indebted to. I think everyone needs a singing teacher. Not everyone agrees with me, but I happen to need desperately a singing teacher.
A sort of musical guru.
Yes, I suppose so. You need a spare pair of ears. And she also has an insight into acting and all sorts of marvellous things that you don't know come into singing, because she treats it like an athlete. My throat specialist says you've got an athletic throat, which is literally a singing throat, you know.
Yes.
And you've got to treat it like an athlete. And so athletes need coaches and people to work them out, and, you know, masseurs and all sorts of things like that. I happen to need and have great devotion to my very, very good singing teacher.
You haven't mentioned his name.
Oh, it's a lady. She's Hungarian, and her name is Vera Rocha.
Your big opportunity at Covent Garden, of course, the Countess in The Marriage of Figaro.
That's right.
Was that the first time you'd sung it?
No, I had a trial run in Santa Fe about 6 months before.
Mm-hmm.
While Covent Garden were training me in the role, I was obliged to learn it in Italian, then learn it back into English for Santa Fe, then come back to England and learn it in Italian again.
Yes, that must
It was
be
pretty hard.
Rather tricky.
It was. But it was a wonderful trial run, and I had a good go at it before I did it at Covent Garden, because really it's very daunting to go in first off, major role.
Yes. After those, 2 or 3 very small parts.
Yes, it was a frightening
and you
situation.
made a very big impression, as you know.
Well, it was rather nice. I think I actually impressed myself by being able to sing through it. It was, to me, the most enormous part to sing. I've since discovered it's not quite as enormous as I thought.
Record number 4.
Number 4. Well, someone I've admired always through my singing life is Janet Baker, and I'd love to hear her sing the Berlioz Villanelle from Les Nuits d'été.
Janet Baker singing Villanelle, a setting of a poem by Théophile Gautier by Berlioz. Now, you made your big success, your first big success at Covent Garden. Doors were opening. What happened next?
Well, I don't think very much if I look back on it, but of course I started to believe that I was reasonably good, and I thought, no, this is not right. So I quickly went back to Vera, and I started going really hectically at singing lessons again. I thought an overnight success wonder, whatever you call it, can't happen like that. It shouldn't be as easy as that, if you know what I mean. It wasn't easy. It was a big year's build-up and everything. And so I started studying even more with voice and everything.
Yes.
And of course, no one really realizes, and I certainly didn't even at the time, that I had literally one role, which was Figaro, the Countess. That's all I had.
When did you first sing Desdemona in Othello?
First was Scottish opera, and it must have been about a year after, or to 18 months.
That was your second major
Yes,
role, wasn't it?
Yes, up in Scottish opera. It was good. Another dry run, as they say, but with a marvellous cast. I had Charles Craig and Peter Glossop, which is
That's
pretty
not bad,
amazing.
is it?
Yes, I was.
And what were your next major roles at Covent Garden?
The next one came, I think, was Simone Boccanegra, would it have been? I did Figaro again, I know, and then I did something like Simone, but then I started to record Don Giovanni, Elvira, and I think it was Boccanegra, and then came Elvira on stage, because I recorded Elvira before I sang it.
Elvira
on stage.
in Don Giovanni.
Yes.
And Carmen's mate, now that you'd stopped
yes.
playing Carmen, you were Michaela.
Yes, in a lovely production with Schulte, who was a wonderful experience for me.
What about Glyndebourne? How much have you worked there?
Not very much, not as much as I would like. I did Figaro for 2 years running there, as I did with Covent Garden. Glyndebourne was one of the very happy periods of my life, I must say it, but it was in a fantasy world, because I remember not long after, having not had holidays for 4 or 5 years, I suddenly came to my end, my crunch, and sort of had to take a 3-month break because of overwork. And once you've got on it, was a merry-go-round. It's constant. It's continual. Got to learn a new role. Got to revive something, and it just goes on and on and on. I love every minute of it, but sometimes the work pressure is too much, especially if you have a happy home life and a wonderful family life.
Yes. And of course, soon after you arrived here, you were married.
Yes.
And now you have a family.
Yes.
Your debut at the Metropolitan New York, that was rather dramatic, wasn't it?
That was another goodie. I don't seem to sort of go into things very lightly. I seem to be sort of, I land by parachute somewhere. It was 1976, and it was the first night of this particular season, which was a frightening thing. It was the 9th of February, I think, to be exact. And they rang me up from the Met at 11 o'clock, and it was a 2 o'clock start. And I remember, I said to the girl who was staying with me, I said, if it's the Met, tell them I'm out. And she did, of course, which was the silliest thing. And they said, would she please ring us back as soon as she gets back? Of course, the telephone was down by this time. And so I waited for a few minutes and thought, my goodness, it can't really be true. And they rang back within about 10 minutes, and they said, you're on.
What was the opera?
Othello.
Desdemona.
Yes.
Which you'd done previously with Scottish opera.
That's right.
How long before?
It was about 3 years before.
So you had 3 hours' notice to sing a part that you hadn't thought of, really, for 3 years.
One of the best Othellos in the world, of course, John Vickers.
John Vickers.
And James Levine.
Yeah.
And the Metropolitan is another daunting opera house. You can't just sort of pop in there and sing a couple of numbers. You've got to be really good. And I was just
And you
terrified.
hadn't seen the production? You didn't know anything about the sets and who went on where?
I'd seen the dress rehearsal, actually. I went to watch that because they had me come over much earlier to see all of this and prepare for...
You were going to play Desdemona eventually?
I was going to do it, yes. I was going to do it 1 month later. But it happened 1 month earlier, and then I didn't, of course, do it for another month, which was really frightening, because I was going up the wall. I thought, now I've done one, and there's not another one available unless she cancels. So I had to wait out the month, and it was a terrible time. And it was a very lonely period, because I tried to ring my husband in England, and he wasn't at home, and everyone was away, but everyone was away, and they were all going to come for the first night on the 5th of March or 6th of March or whatever it was. And I've already done it. So I rang up the next day and I said, guess what's happened? I've made my Metropolitan debut with nobody knowing it.
What else have you played at the Met?
I've done Elvira, And by chance, of course, I did it at Covent Garden before I did it at the Met. The Met was also going to be another first, Elvira. So, and then I did Figaro.
Yes.
Now I'm going back to do Così and things like that.
And other parts at Covent Garden, looking at my list here, you played Arabella, Richard Strauss's Arabella.
Yes.
And, of course, Fledermaus. We know about Fledermaus because you've televised it twice.
Yes, yes. Well, this year in Fledermaus I did a funny. So John Tooley asked me to sing in the gala, the final performance in Fledermaus. So I came out in Tyrolean mountain climbing gear with rope, horn, and live goat.
Live goat?
Live goat. And sang Climb Every Mountain. But it was announced that I would sing Sempre Libera from La Traviata by Jonathan Summers, who was Australian. And, of course, he said it in the broadest Australian accent, which is really very, very funny. I was killing myself before I got on stage. And then I walked out with this goat named Sally, who was terribly well behaved. And I thought, what am I doing here? This is crazy. This is a foolish thing to do, but I loved every minute of it.
Right. Your next record, which is what?
My next record is, well, I like strange things, and I like rather primitive sounds. And I think this next recording is that, in that it's, and brings out my little bit of Catholic training. Missa Criolla, please.
Señor, ten piedad de nosotros. Señor, ten piedad de nosotros. Señor, ten piedad de nosotros.
The Kyrie from the Missa Criolla, conducted by the composer Ariel Ramirez. Now, we talked about your television appearances in Fledermaus. Have you done much television opera?
Yes, I did Marriage of Figaro, and Marriage of Figaro for Southern Television as well. Unitel did the other Marriage of Figaro, which hasn't been shown in this country, and I'd love it to be shown because it's really, very lovely. It's a Pornell production of his normal production of Figaro.
And you've appeared in the Joseph Losey film of Don Giovanni,
Yes.
of which there's a certain amount of...
Not to be confused with Mozart's Don Giovanni.
Exactly, that's what they said in the Times. Yes, but that hasn't been shown here yet.
No, I hope it will be sometime. It's bringing opera, reviving opera, I think. And Losey, who didn't really see the opera, or never saw it, only heard of Fritz Busch, a recording of it, I think did a fantastic job on location in all Palladio settings.
Yes.
Beautiful costumes. The soundtrack is wonderful.
Was the opera recorded first and then you mimed, as it were, to the track?
Yes, it was. We recorded it 6 months before, I think, in Paris, in a really rather dingy church. And then we went on location. I must say, after I'd finished the film, I didn't want to see any Palladio in my life again.
How long did it take?
Well, it took them, I think, 3.5 months. It took me 6 to 7 weeks. But it was quite horrendous, the scheduling. No rehearsal, because there wasn't any time. And it was done as a truly cinema-type film with one camera only, which is the true, evidently, way of doing films, according to Losey's cinema. And I believed it because there was one cameraman, one pair of eyes, where if you had 7 cameramen, you'd have 7 different versions of what they wanted. I think it's a truly beautiful film.
What do you have lined up for the future?
For the future, I have a new Romeo and Juliet in Paris. Incidentally, I happen to love Paris very much. I love French music very much as well.
This is the Gounod Romeo and Juliet?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
lovely.
Yes, beautiful. And I love the French chanson and the Auvergne, all that sort of thing, that sort of music and stuff. Then I have Rosenkavalier coming up.
At Covent Garden?
At Paris first and then Covent Garden, I hope.
You're going to be at Covent Garden quite a lot this year.
In this year, yes, I do Magic Flute and a new Boccanegra.
Record number 6.
Number 6. Well, this is a little bit naughty, I'm sure, but I happen to like Anna Russell. I went to see her live.
We all.
Really? I'm glad you do. And she's giving her version of Rheingold.
The scene opens in the River Rhine. In it. And swimming around there are the 3 Rhine maidens. a sort of aquatic Andrew sister. And sing their signature tune, which is as follows. I won't translate it because it doesn't mean anything.
A Wagnerian lecture by Anna Russell. We've been talking about opera all the time. What about concerts and recitals? How important are those in your career?
Well, I find they're very important for the pure vocal technique. One tends to, in opera, forget about technique quite often in order for effect. Opera is that sort of thing. Sometimes you've got to sort of show blood in order to be convincing. And with a concert, it is just pure singing. My singing teacher says that the Mozart is the lubrication for your voice, and I believe it, as concerts are the stimulation for your brain and the things that you need to convince yourself that you haven't lacked or slackened off in any area. You can still hold, say, an audience and sell a song.
Yes.
That's what I'm interested in, is to give over a song and for people to receive it as I would give it out. I'm not doing it just to sort of just sing it because it's just a song.
From the way you speak, it sounds rather as if the concerts are a support for your opera. Does that mean that opera really is more important?
Well, I think it is really. But the concerts keep it going. To keep my vocal technique going. But you could put it much better than me anyway. Why couldn't I say that?
Next record.
Next record is the Chieftains recording of the Women of Ireland, which once again has got a very primitive sound. I love these rather natural primitive sounds.
So this was from the film Barry Lyndon, wasn't it?
Yes. I love it very, very much.
Women of Ireland by the Chieftains. Now, you're in the sunshine on this quite pleasant island. Could you look after yourself? Are you good with your hands?
Absolutely, yes.
Really?
The brain is a bit sort of fuzzy, but the hands are fantastic.
You could rig up a shelter.
Oh, yes, all of that. I'm terribly practical.
Food? No problem?
No problem, no. I could
Fishing?
fish, yeah.
You've
all
done
of that.
some, have you?
Oh, yes, all of that. Stepped in the open with my dad while we went trout fishing in New Zealand. I slept there under the stars in a sleeping bag and cooked the freshly caught trout on the open fire. I can do all of those things.
Handle small boats?
Oh, yes, all of that. I rowed when I was age 7, so I can...
Would you try to escape?
Oh, no, whatever for. I've been trying to get there for so many years, I think I'll stay.
Your last record, we've had no opera yet.
Well, why should I take a long opera when I've got it all sticking up there? I've had to work at it for so long. Give me a little bit of light relief.
Right. What's the light relief?
Well, may I dedicate this to all the old people in the world who possibly have finished their work and in retirement and bored with life, to not give up hope, because I have a most wonderful father. He's 75 years old. He works a 12-hour day for me, in the house and things like that, cutting down trees and things like that. And I'd like to vote it to all those old people who might have given up hope, because life is still worthwhile. You can still do things for yourself. And here's this darling Louis Armstrong who never gave up, singing What a Wonderful World.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Louis Armstrong. If you could take only one disc out of the 8.
Please, may I have Mozart, and I can do my Isadora Duncan.
The Mozart
Yes.
Flute Concerto.
Yes, please. You can just imagine it, can't you?
And you're allowed one luxury.
Well, I'm a compulsive entertainer, and I love to cook. and I have a funny thing. I buy knives, so I must have a frustration in me to stab something. But every first night I buy a black-handled knife, and I've got quite a collection, so please may I take all my knives.
A collection of knives?
Yes, one of those blocks. There's a wooden block you can buy,
Yes.
and the knives stick inside. It's all got little slits, and I think I've got 20 of them.
This is for cooking?
For cooking, yeah. All shapes and sizes.
Yes.
There's serrated, long salmon knives, chopping knives, all sorts of little short knives.
If you'll promise just to use them for cooking and not for building huts, not to use them as
right.
chopping
I'll keep
tools
them in
and
the
so forth.
chopping block.
That's fair enough. And one book, apart from the Bible and Shakespeare, which are already there, and not a big encyclopedia, please.
I've thought very seriously about this. Wouldn't like to waste my time. I'd like War and Peace in French. And please,
Yes.
could I have a dictionary, English-French dictionary?
Oh, that's fair enough.
Think that would be allowed?
Mm-hmm.
Then you see, if I had it in French, I could learn French, and I could put it back into English and all that sort of thing. I wouldn't be wasting my time.
No, indeed you wouldn't. And thank you, Kiri Te Kanawa, for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
It's been a lovely day, thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
You've been listening to a podcast from the Desert Island Discs archive. For more podcasts, please visit bbc.co.uk/Radio 4.